In October 1981, after finishing the album Reactor, Neil Young continued recording with Crazy Horse, with new songs like Computer Age. The song started off life as a Stones-esque rocker, written after Young had seen the Stones at Candlestick Park in San Francisco on their huge American tour of that year. It started like we always do, said Crazy Horse guitarist Poncho San Pedro. 2 guitars, bass and drums. But Young kept tinkering around, playing with his new digital toys, the Synclavier and the Vocoder, and Poncho was shocked to hear Young had stripped off all the instruments from the song and replaced them all with the new electronic sounds, the synth shit as Poncho called it. Producer David Briggs said they might have played on the songs, but they didn't think it was music. Young and Briggs have been listening to Kraftwerk, leading to the heavy use of the Sennheiser vocoder on these new songs. Enamoured with the idea of singing through a voice that wouldn't be recognised as his own, he worked on some new songs, including one called Sample and Hold, that was heavily influenced by another one of Young's non-musical interests around this time, model trains. Young had enjoyed playing with model trains in his childhood, but in the last few years, this interest had been reignited to the point of obsession. He'd built a model landscape to run his trains around that got so big he had to house it in its own barn, complete with a separate building for just the little locomotives alone. Young's interest even encompassed the control systems for these trains, leading him to go ahead and hire people to help him develop a more sophisticated digital controller. This immersion in the technical language of digital control systems had a big influence on the lyrics of the new songs, particularly Sample and Hold, which was a phrase directly lifted from the development of this digital model train control system. As Young was developing this new sound in the studio, the album Reactor was released in October of 1981, and with not being able to go out to promote it due to him still being committed to the 14-hour-a-day therapy program for his disabled son Ben, Young's manager Elliot Roberts had to ask Reprise to promote the record without telling them why Young couldn't promote it, because Neil didn't want anyone to know. He didn't want anyone to feel sorry for him, said Roberts. The album flopped on release, and Young's relationship with the label quickly deteriorated. Young didn't help matters by requesting that the Southern Pacific single be issued on triangular vinyl, which caused manufacturing issues. After some further requests were also ignored by the label, Roberts and Young were seriously pissed off, and after 13 years of being with the label, Neil Young left Reprise. The label they chose to go to was a safe bet. David Geffen had started his record label in 1980 and was Elliot Roberts' friend. They had co-managed CSNY together. It was a no-brainer. Geffen offered Neil Young $1 million guaranteed per album. In an interview from 1982, Roberts said that David Geffen totally relates to Neil as an artist and had no preconceived notions. Neil's not concerned with selling lots of records, but making records that he's pleased with. David Geffen relates to that. So with this new record deal in the bag, for his first official recording sessions as a Geffen artist, he put his new vocoder and Synclavier material to one side for now, and instead assembled an all-star band and took them off to Hawaii to record a new album. Dubbed the Royal Pineapples, there was Ralph Molina on drums, Ben Keith on steel, Nils Lofgren on guitar, Joe Lalla from the CSNY band on percussion, and Bruce Palmer on bass, the original Buffalo Springfield bass player, who Young hadn't played with in about 12 years. In May 1982, the band recorded an album called Island in the Sun, and the vibe was mellow. Acoustic guitars, bongos, love songs, and a reworking of the 1976 song Hitchhiker, which was now called Like an Inca, replacing most of the original lyrics with new ones. David Geffen himself went out to Hawaii to hear some of the material, but was slightly underwhelmed. Geffen thought it was okay, Young said later, but he didn't think it was quite good enough. He said we could do more with the songs, basically encouraging him to continue working on the songs. But instead of carrying on working on that material, Young turned back to the vocoder and Synclavier material and developed that instead. The resulting album that he submitted to Geffen was a mixture of the Hawaii stuff and the electronic stuff. It was slated for release in December of 1982. I thought it was really good shit, said Young later. The only thing wrong with it was I tried to hide it a bit by putting the Hawaii stuff in there as well, to make it seem like a transition from a real person to a machine, or something like that. Young wanted to put out a series of music videos for the album that would illustrate and expand the understanding of the vocoder material. I had a big concept, he said. All of the electronic voice people were working in a hospital, trying to teach a little baby to push a button. That's what the record is about. It's my search for a way for a severely handicapped, non-oral person to find an interface for communication. This idea for a series of high-concept music videos led to Young's first of many fallings out with his new label. Geffen refused to put the money up to make these videos, saying that he only needed one video. In the end, no videos were made. The album, called Trans, kicked off with A Little Thing Called Love. An upbeat number from the Hawaii sessions, all acoustic guitars and bongos, that whilst being a good song is a little bit of a catfish, as he then drops 4 vocoder songs in a row, starting with Computer Age, which is all Neil Young on synclavier, vocoder and guitars. Neil Young didn't dispense with his songwriting traditions and techniques for trance. The vocoder songs are still vintage Neil Young in terms of the writing. He's still singing about cars and highways on Computer Age. Cars and trucks fly by me on the corner, precious metal lines moulded into highways. The electronic voice is singing a love song to a traffic light. When I see the light, I feel like I'm more than just a number. Bikes and bands fly by me on the corner. We Are in Control envisions a time where computers basically control everything. Data banks, think tanks, the flow of air, traffic lights, the TV sky and the FBI. This might have sounded fanciful in 1982, but actually right now it does sound like a pretty accurate description of the world we live in. Computer Age, in harm's way, we will prevail and perform our function. Transformer Man is a beautiful song that stands up on its own when played acoustically, as proved when he included it in the MTV Unplugged performance in 1993 with no electronic treatment at all. It was a song for his son, Ben. If you read the words and look at my child in his wheelchair, he said, with his little button and switch on his head, his train set and his transformer, the whole thing is for him. People didn't get it, they didn't know the backstory, but for Young, it was a cathartic moment. I was keeping it inside, but I dumped the load right there on Trans and told the whole fucking story, he said later. So for me, it's great. With Transformer Man, he said, you can't understand the words, and I can't understand my son's words. So feel that. Transformer Man, Transformer Man. Computer Cowboy was the story of a cattle farmer who is also a computer hacker, a 21st century outlaw, according to Young, who after finishing his daily duties with his herd, hacks into computer systems at night, using the alias Sis Crusher. Musically, the song blends heavier guitars with the vocoder voice, with Crazy Horse backing him on this one. It's an absolutely mental blend of 80s riff rock and electronica with a western theme, and that's a genre that has sadly never taken off. Side 2 opens with Hold On To Your Love, another one of the Hawaii songs, which at first sounds like it's another synth song, but then you realise the high-pitched noise is Ben Keith's steel guitar and not the synclavier. Then we're back into the vocoder songs with the brilliant Sample and Hold, a robot's request for a new lover. I need a unit to sample and hold, but not the lonely one, a new design. Please specify the colour of skin and eye. We know you'll be happy. Young electronically distorts his guitar heavily on this song until it sounds like it's glitching, which is great. The song predates Daft Punk by 15 years and is one of the highlights of the album, in my opinion. To sample and hold. We know you'll be satisfied when you energize. You see or you Young's synclavier version of his Buffalo Springfield song, Mr. Soul, is the next track, complete with vocoder harmonies, glitching guitar solo, and emphasis on the repetitive drum beat, and is another highlight of the album. The last track on the album is one of the Hawaii songs again, but this time with Like an Inca, Young offers something more substantial than the previous ones, rewriting his earlier song, Hitchhiker, that had been a very personal, self-reflective one, into a meditation on humanity's self-destruction. He gives it the full band treatment here, complete with quirky, fluttering guitar phrases over a repeated minor chord riff that runs for almost 10 minutes. Set the condor to the praying mantis. We're gonna lose this place, just like we lost Atlantis. Brother, we gotta go. It's a great song that, despite the tonal shift from the vocoder material back to the more acoustic-based sound, provides a fitting climax to the album that leaves you with having experienced, if nothing else, a journey of some sort. The sound of an artist really pushing himself past the limits of his comfort zone. For that alone, Young should have been lauded, but reviews were decidedly mixed when the album came out belatedly in January of 1983. The Enemy described the album as neither very soulful nor very mechanistic, and said the vocoder vocals sounded like the kind of horrid electronic carols you get on your Christmas TV, whatever that means. Before the album's release though, back in August 1982, Neil Young redubbed his band, the Royal Pineapples, into the Trans Band, and they went out and played 5 small club dates in California. Then they headed over to Europe for a tour. Not just any old tour, mind you. Ever since seeing the Stones back in 81, Young had been smitten with the idea of going big, just like them. Literally, a giant stage was constructed to cart around to all the European arenas at great expense. With the gross income of the tour expected to be around $2.3 million, they went ahead and committed $1 million into the production. Then it was realised the actual gross was going to be more along the lines of about 1.6 million. Some in Young's camp were concerned, but Young himself said, "I'm hard to deal with when I get an idea in my mind and I want to do something." And so the Trans Tour began in France at the end of August 82 at the Parc des Sports Annecy. 4 of the 19 songs played were from the then still unreleased new album, but most of the set was familiar to audiences, with the vocoder material being saved for last. After Like a Hurricane, they went on to Germany, Italy and the Netherlands, where Computer Age was introduced early in the set. In Birmingham, England, at the NEC, they slipped in Transformer Man as well, so by now there were 5 or 6 trans songs in the set. The final show of the tour was in West Berlin on the 19th of October, which was filmed and broadcast a year later on HBO. Although audiences may have been nonplussed by the vocoder material, Young even says some people booed during those songs, they were brilliantly recreated on stage, and the shows were very musically tight and pretty well received overall. David Briggs was critical of the band's performances, saying only Nils Lofgren was playing well, but listening back to a lot of the performances tells a different story. But behind the scenes, the tour was shaping up to be the most disastrous of Young's career. It took 3 trucks to haul the gigantic stage with its 40-foot runway around Europe. There were 116 people on the payroll, and expenses were running at $38,000 a day, whether they went on stage or not. Young was feeling the pressure, and on one occasion completely lost his shit. He had issues with the rampant drinking amongst the band members, particularly Bruce Palmer, who could reportedly empty a minibar in a minute, and it was starting to affect his performances. During a band meeting, Young told Palmer that he had to lay off the booze, but Palmer made the mistake of saying, "I'm not drinking," basically lying to Young's face. According to Joe Lalla, Neil flew across the room like Superman, knocked him over and started strangling him. Things calmed down as the tour progressed, but Palmer remained scatty throughout, right down to the last date. When the band were just about to launch into the last song, After Berlin, which was written specially for that performance and freshly learned that same afternoon, Bruce went up to Neil on stage and asked, "What song is this?" In the end, Young lost $750,000 on the tour, even though every date was sold out. It was just too big, way too big, he said later. My eyes were too big for my stomach. In the January of 1983, as the album was being released, Young went on a solo tour of the US, perhaps as a way to earn back some of that money he'd just thrown away. He played some of the trans material, but also a whole bunch of new country style songs, which he also went to Nashville to record between the 27th and the 29th of January. And then he continued on his solo tour, but doing this tour straight after the big trans tour, recording new songs in between dates, having to deal with all the financial headaches, was taking a serious toll on Young's nervous system. And on March the 4th in Louisville, Kentucky, Young passed out in the dressing room after the first set and didn't come back out for the second. And there the solo tour abruptly ended. Young cancelled the rest of the dates before deciding on making his next move. With trans, Young had thrown an utter curveball at his fans, critics, and his new record label. But actually, he had just been doing what he always did, following the muse, for good or ill. I feel really good about what I did in the 80s, he said later, although I took a lot of shit for it because I did feel everything I was doing. David Briggs defended trans also, saying he was proud of Young for making the album. In rock and roll, it's hard to find new ground, he said. Trans was a success in the fact that a major established artist put his whole career on the line to go to new ground. Critics should at least applaud the guy, as opposed to just dismissing it. Although the album still gets mixed reviews to this day, Trans is actually one of Neil Young's most personal expressions, stemming from the deeply emotional frustration of being unable to communicate with his young son. Listening again to the album with that knowledge in mind makes it a much more meaningful experience, which I highly recommend, if only just to sample and hold for a little while. With Trans, Neil Young had never been bolder in his musical experimentation and had taken a huge gamble financially on the European mega tour, which had backfired spectacularly. But thankfully his new record label, Geffen, were with him all the way, supporting every artistic and financial risk he would take. Oh, sorry, I'm reading the wrong notes there. Let me just check that. Oh, okay. Right. Neil Young's new label, Geffen. Oh, okay. Well, in the next video, we'll have a look at the relationship between Geffen Records and Neil Young, because things were about to go from kind of okay to bad to worse. Much, much worse. So look out for that next video. Make sure you're subscribed and notified. Also, check out the other videos in this series. Link is in the description below. But that's all from me on this one. Bye for now.
Cars and trucks fly by me on the corner, but I'm alright, standing proud before the signal. When I see the light, I feel like more than just a number. And I stand by you, or else we just don't see the